Which bad bass leaps are you committing in your music? This is Dr. Doug's Daily Tips for How to Write LDS Church Music, and today we're going to take a look at the bass line and help you avoid the bad kind of leaps that you want to stay far, far away from. To help us do this, we're going to look at hymn 119 in the LDS Hymn No, Come We That Love the Lord. So, in music, of course, we have the melody. For example, in this hymn, and we have the bass line. Now, you've noticed that I've bracketed some things here in red. Look at the opening of the bass line. We have these leaps. Leap of a third, another leap of a third, then a leap of an octave, and then step, step, step. Okay, well, how do you know which bass leaps are good and which bass leaps are bad? One of the common mistakes that I see people who are beginning their hands, just giving this a try, this whole writing music thing a try, is I see them often using too many inversions in a row. What do I mean by that? Well, an inversion is a chord that used to be in root position, and now the root got moved up, and a different note of the chord is in the bass. So let's zoom in here. If we had the chord F, A, C, an F major chord, and then let's say we inverted it, so we take the F up an octave. That's what we call first inversion, or that would be a 1 chord with a 6 next to it, meaning there's a 6th above the bass. It's in first inversion. Or if we took then now this bass note, the C, and moved it up an octave, we have second inversion, which we call 6/4. Okay, so those are inversions of the same F major chord, the 1 chord. Now, if you have too many different chords in a row and they're all inverted, that can be a mess. But let me categorize that, because there's a couple different ways you can think of this. There's one caveat that you can get away with, okay? So if you have, let's make some notes up here. If you have a string of first inversion chords, that's okay. So you could have 1-6 going to 2-6, going to 3-6, going to 4-6. That's totally fine. Or reverse, 4-6, 3-6, 2-6, 1-6. The reason that's fine is because when you have first inversion, the bass line and the harmony are based upon what we call sixths. And if you have several in a row, they make what we call parallel sixths. So take a sixth, for example, like A and F. If you do them all in a row like that, those are great. That's a great way to write music. So those would be good inversions to have in a row in your bass line. Here's an example of a bad set of inversions to use in your bass line. If you were going, something like the 3 chord, and then you went to an inversion of the 6 chord, let's say second inversion, and then you went to another kind of inversion on the 2 chord, and then you went to the 5 chord in a strange inversion, that makes for a very bizarre bass line. But I see this sometimes when someone has been using harmony for a little bit, and they're starting to have some fun, and they're trying to get more interesting with their harmony, but they can take it a little bit too far sometimes. And this is an example of too far. Okay, this would be a series of bad bass leaps. Now, the reason why is because they're never resolving. These bass notes need to have a sense of resolution. Now, there is a really good time when the bass is leaping a lot. And that's what happens in this hymn. So let's take a look. At the very beginning here, this bass part leaps a ton. Now, this works for one specific reason. if you add up all of those chords in that bracket, you'll notice that every single one of those chords is the same chord. Those are all F major chords. Here, 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 and here. So why is all of this leaping bass part not bad? Because they're all the same chord. That's an excellent time to have a very leapy bass part. All right? But I wouldn't do it for too long. And notice they don't. They leap a bit within the F chord, and then the bass line gets smoothed out and steps. Okay, just like a melody where you have a series of steps and occasional leaps, a bass line likes to do the same kind of thing. To have a good smooth bass line, you want to have lots of sections of stepping interspersed with leaping. And usually you use your leaps sparingly in the bass, but sometimes if you want to have several in a row, that's where you do what's done here. You take the same chord and leap around in the same chord. All right, this next little bit basically does the same thing. We have another F chord here. Then we have this little passing motion to another F chord. This time the F chord's in first inversion. And then more passing motion to another F chord. So it's not quite as leapy, but we are hitting the same chord multiple times in a row. It's just a little bit smoother because it has those little in-between eighth notes. But same kind of figure. Okay, then the chord pauses, the music pauses on the 5 chord here. And the very next chord is another 5 chord. And look at how the bass is leaping again. So the bass paused on 5 on this C, and then it leapt, but is that a bad leap? No, that's a good leap because it's leaping within the same chord. Nice, huh? Same thing happens here. Big leap, but is it a bad leap? Nope, because it's happening within the same chord. What about this one? Those are both 5 chords. So those are good leaps. Now, one thing to look at, I forgot to mention this one's a 1 chord. But look at the connection between this 1 chord here and this 5 chord here. Often, when you leap in your bass, a big leap, you often want to step out of it, especially if you're going to a different chord. It doesn't happen in this case. In this case, the composer does another leap. The reason it kind of works out, though, is because we start with root position on the word in, then we go to first inversion, and then we go back to root position, and then first inversion. But if we had gone root position, first inversion, and then first inversion of the 5 chord, that's less good. We need a bit of foundation, okay? So if you're leaping in the bass within 1 chord, usually you're going to step out of it into the next series of leaps to make sure we have grounding, okay? Like happens in the next grouping. This grouping, the bass is leaping again, but it's connected by a step. See that? A little step right there. And this particular one is slightly different than the others because the chords aren't quite the same, but they're almost the same. And that's another point I want to make. See here, the first chord here is a 1 chord, F, A, C. The next chord is a 6 chord, D, F, A. But F, A, C, and D, F, A, they share 2 notes. Those are almost the same chord. They're only 1 note different. It's the C and the D that are different between those chords. These are what we call substitute chords. A 1 chord and a 6 chord can take the place of each other. So in a similar fashion that we've had 2 1 chords next to each other, both with leaping bass, or 2 5 chords next to each other, both with leaping bass, or in the case of the first measure, 4 1 chords with leaping bass, it also works pretty well to have a leaping bass between substitute chords, 1 and 6. Okay, so what you're really trying to avoid is leap from inversion to inversion to inversion. Stepping from inversion to inversion to inversion, like I mentioned earlier, if you're going 1-6, 2-6, 3-6, 4-6, that's stepping from inversion to inversion. But if you're going to leap from inversion to inversion in some kind of big leapy bass line like this, and all the chords are inversions and they're different chords, those are the bad bass leaps you want to avoid. That is your composer gem for today. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, hit subscribe, ring the bell so you get all these notifications, and head over to latterdaymusiversity.com where you can get a 24-page report for free. It's called The 10 Commandments of How to Write Great LDS Church Music. Come back tomorrow and we'll do some more composer gems. See you then.